Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Medaris. I am the Health Beat leader on freelance for AHCJ. The webinar today is one of a series of topic-specific trainings, opportunities to brief health journalists on the latest information in a particular health area, and to give you story ideas or resources you can use in your work. Today's topic is finding sustainable work you love in an era of relentless layoffs. When my last full-time employer, Business Insider, announced its round of layoffs in spring 2023, I thought that was an era of unrelenting layoffs, but the slashes haven't stopped. Around that time and ever since, we've seen significant cuts at pretty much every major and minor publication, including the LA Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, NBC, ABC, Hearst, Condé Nast, Vox, Bustle, Huffington Post, Sports Illustrated. We saw the Messenger startup spectacularly fail. Vice and BuzzFeed left the news business. A number of top Politico reporters and editors have left the site, and healthcare specific outlets like Stat and 538 have suffered too. But today's webinar is less about commiserating with each other and more about empowering you to find sustainable work you love, whether you've recently been let go, are worried you soon could be, or generally just crave more insight and support in this unusual and turbulent industry. So as our panelists and I can tell you, the path may not be easy or straightforward, but it is possible and rewarding to find work you love. So joining me today is Melissa Dahl, an independent health journalist with more than 15 years of experience on staff at publications like New York Magazine, Bustle, Digital Group, and NBC News. Zach Tracer, a senior editor for business and policy at Stat, where he oversees business and policy coverage. He's a former colleague of mine who landed his current job after another series of layoffs at Business Insider. Melissa Aguilar, a freelance reporter and Emmy Award-winning journalist who's remained in the news business over 4 decades, despite enduring a layoff, firing, and newsroom downsizing. She's the former president of the Society of Professional Journalists and the first Latina president, and runs a newsletter rounding up journalism jobs. Chandra Turner, founder of The Talent Fairy, a boutique recruiting agency that connects brands with editorial leaders. She's also a career coach and former editor of publications, including Parents, Cosmo Girl, and Cosmopolitan. So I'll let our guests introduce themselves further and maybe tell all of our listeners kind of a little bit about their paths in and out of journalism and kind of what sorts of insights they can bring all of you today to get your brains turning about what questions you want to ask. Most of this webinar will be Q&A with all of you, so please use the Q&A box and not the chat function to ask your questions. If you want to direct it at one panelist or another, you can, or you can just address it to the group and I can pick and choose who to ask. So why don't we go ahead and start? We'll just go the same order that I just introduced you and tell us a little bit more about yourselves and your careers. So Melissa, kick us off.
Hi, thanks for having me, Anna. I'm so excited to talk about this. It's such a good topic. Like Anna said, I'm a journalist with more than 15 years of experience covering health on staff at various publications. And then last year, after 16 years in digital media, the layoffs finally found me. I lost my job at Bustle Digital Group at 5.5 months pregnant. Super cool. So since then, I almost think about it as like an accidental freelancer because, I think it's so cool people who kind of just take the leap and do it on purpose. That wasn't me. I thought I was the kind of person, I always thought would say I'm the personality type who kind of wants the stability of a job. But I think largely because of being pregnant and being that pregnant, freelancing was just what worked last year, and it's still actually what's working now. And it's starting to feel, in some ways, the kind of that key word in this title is sustainable. In some ways, it feels more sustainable than having a full-time job because, I mean, as we all know, layoffs can happen at any time, and they do. And I think about a lot like if one of my gigs kind of went away, I've got other things now. So currently I've been lucky to find 2 steady gigs with like long-term contracts, one in corporate comms and one writing health stories for New York Magazine. So Yeah, I'm happy to be here and kind of share what I've learned along the way. I'm a little wary of being overly prescriptive, but I have found it helpful to hear other people's paths and other people's stories. So I just wanted to do the same today.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. Zach, let's go to you.
Great. I'm realizing we're going to have a secondary theme. So thank you for having me. I was laid off from Business Insider in early 2024. I had been there about 5 years, and before that, I was at Bloomberg News for like 7 or 8 years, so a dozen or so years in the industry. Um, I was laid off about 2 or 3 months before I was supposed to go on paternity leave. So we can talk all about that and about interviewing for jobs or trying to figure out your job search and working around that. Obviously, very different for me as a man, but still, I think kind of relevant and noteworthy. And congrats on your baby, Melissa. Um, I recently started. I started at Stat in June of 2024. Negotiated for some unpaid parental leave and stuff. I've been there ever since. So happy to talk about really any of that. I also did some freelance work while I was in between jobs.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Off to Rebecca, who I miscalled Melissa last time. Sorry about that.
No problem, no problem. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I'm so glad to be with all these panelists who are also experts, and I look up to them and can't wait to hear more from them. I have been a reporter more than 40 years. I started in Toledo, Ohio, and now I'm in Dallas. So there are several markets in between: Chicago, Corpus Christi, San Antonio, Phoenix, Los Angeles, and Dallas. I have seen layoffs. I have been laid off. I've been fired. I have seen the downsizing of newsrooms. I have seen companies take over a company and all of a sudden I'm out of a job, and so have my colleagues. You may be hearing about a lot of layoffs now because of social media, but back in the day when I started 40 years ago, you didn't, but they were happening too. And so I think I have survived. Now I'm a freelance reporter, but I do a lot of my free time helping other reporters stay in the business, stay motivated, and just be focused. Because I think with all the noise, not only from, let's just be honest, the current administration to, all the different companies that are downsizing, and then all the noise you see everywhere. I've been laid off, I've been treated like this. Sometimes we get lost in the shuffle. And so today, while I am a freelance reporter, now I get to pick and choose the stories I want. And I also consult because I've been doing it so long. By the way, I did 28 years in television news, and then I became a freelancer, not because I wanted to, but because I got a divorce from my last TV station. But as I said in a blog about 10 years ago, the two words that changed my life for the better: you're fired. And so I think that I'm here. Hopefully, I will inspire people, help them keep moving forward. Because if I've been doing this now 44 years, I'm not saying you'll last this long, but it's possible.
Love that. Thank you. Chandra, take it away.
Yes. Hi, I'm Chandra Turner. I am the founder of The Talent Fairy, which, as Anna said, I run a recruiting agency. I connect editorial talent with media companies, but more often non-media companies. And that is really my sweet spot, is working with people that grew up as journalists and editors and making that transition out of ad-supported media into non-media brands, or what you consider to be traditional media. There's a lot of media out there these days that isn't, and it was interesting to hear Melissa say that she's now working in CorpCom. There's a lot of editorial-like work being done that isn't being done by what you consider traditional media companies. Some of this is super obvious, you guys know it, but a lot of it isn't so obvious. So that's what I tend to do the most. I work both with companies who hire me to find the people as a recruiter, and then I also work as a career coach to help people navigate the next steps in their career. And often it is after layoffs. I totally understand what it's like to be laid off. I love it that all of us have been laid off before. I think that's great. Very on brand, maybe too much on brand. I've been laid off 4 times in my career. I started out in magazines, and I worked in magazines for 2 decades. Hearst, Condé Nast, Meredith, the biggies. A lot of the magazines I work for don't exist anymore, at least not in print. So I get it. I've been there. But this job market particularly, and maybe it is because there's more transparency. We see it on social, we see it on LinkedIn, but it is very chaotic. I don't think it helps with the, all the federal layoffs too. I think that makes everybody feel even more nervous. Just feels like that there's so much uncertainty right now. So I'm really feeling that from the clients that I work with. Just know that most people do transition out successfully to work for non-media, more likely than to find another job in media. And I can talk about that more. I just did a study, or I don't say study, a survey of 300 people that define themselves as editors and writers and content strategists. And the #1 area that they find work in is in health and pharma. So just be glad that this is your specialty, because that's the biggest industry that's hiring outside of traditional journalism. So that's a little bit of hope. We can talk more about this throughout if you guys are interested. But anyway, nice to meet everybody.
Great, super helpful. Thank you. And as I told my fellow panelists, I'm in a little co-working space that the light goes off if I don't move enough. And since I'm not doing jumping jacks, you may see me do this here and there, but nothing to be worried about. All right, so reminder, please use the Q&A box to ask questions, and we'll just go through them and continue the discussion. So I guess I'll start off, Rebecca, for people who want to stay in journalism. I know you curate a list of journalism jobs, and I guess, can you tell us a little bit more about that, and also where are you seeing jobs these days in journalism? And part 2, kind of what can people do right now to set themselves up for better luck in finding their next journalism gig?
Well, thank you for that question. Obviously, if I've been in the business 40 years, I have a huge network of journalists out there, some who have moved on and some who are still in the business, some who have become bosses, and some who are new. And so after I was the national president of the Society of Professional Journalists, during that time, I heard from, you name it, from the head guy at NBC to, people just starting nonprofits. Because, you want to know an organization. Sometimes you go straight to the president. After my 1 year, I had this huge network, and I thought, well, I kept seeing people losing their jobs on LinkedIn and everybody. And I'm thinking, why doesn't someone just, reach out to their network and say, you got a job? And so that's what I did. In February of 2023, I said to everybody in my network, if you're connected to me, even if you have a job now, find me a job, give it to me, and I just put it on a list. It's a free list, by the way. Most of my stuff out there is free. And the list is free. And usually have more than 100 jobs. And even after I post 100 jobs, right now, I have like 35 more jobs that other people have sent. I'm talking from television, radio, podcasts, whatever. What I'm seeing too is that there are jobs in every platform, small and large. Soon soon the networks are going to start rehiring, because a lot of them have downsized, rebudgeted, and they have to start all over again. And I just recently talked to someone who's a major player, and he told me, I want young people with experience, but I also want veterans with experience to guide the other people. So someone, who's a veteran, you'll have an opportunity. Don't think that's going to hold you back, because managers have to have some experience to have a successful team. And so the reason I started, you wanted to know, is because I wanted to help other people, but I'm seeing jobs everywhere. My biggest recommendation to anyone out there who just recently lost a job or thinks they're on the bubble, 1, don't panic. Don't panic. There will be a job out there. It may take time to find, but there will be a job out there. Look at your budget right now. See what you can cut out. You don't have to have Hulu, Prime, and YouTube. Start cutting things out. Don't go on some big spending thing. Because let me tell you, when I was fired from my last job, that's what happened to me in my last job. I knew that I didn't need my six-figure salary because I live on a budget. I mean, I grew up in a pretty poor family, so we were on a budget all the time. But live on that budget. Also, if you think you're going to be laid off or you have been laid off, tell the world, everyone and anyone, because we're all connected to somebody. Right now, look at these panelists. If I was looking for a job, I know I can count on all of them to say, hey, you know what? I just met Rebecca on that webinar. Let's see what we can do for her. But don't, more than anything, and I know the other panelists is going to share this, don't be embarrassed to tell people you were laid off. It's not your fault. For some reason, you know, especially women, we've been told to, okay, be quiet, don't say anything, especially your age. But no, you know what? I tell the world, yeah, I was fired, I was laid off. So what? One job. They did not take away my passion for the business. They did not take away my network. They didn't take away my awards, my experience, my friends. So tell everybody and anybody, because see all these people right now on your screen, everybody's connected to someone. And maybe they don't have a job for you, but maybe a friend of a friend of a friend does. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's advice that I love to give as well, just to tap in to your network, which, you know, can have a bad connotation if people don't like networking, but ultimately, you know, I think it's what psychologists call weak ties, or those people that are like one level outside of your immediate circle, because your immediate circle, you all know the same people and have the same opportunities. But if you can kind of tap into those people that are just outside of that, then they have a whole circle that you don't know. And that's how I got some of the questions are about getting freelance work. And that really surprised me when I started freelancing, just how people came out of the woodwork that I had totally forgotten about, but, you know, had been on a committee with 15 years ago, or like went to high school with, and they saw on Facebook, you know, and just they have uncles, or they have, you know, they work in a job that I totally lost track of that could use this sort of work. So really put it out there.
Yeah, you know what, Anna? Call in your favors. You know how many favors I've done for people? Yeah, you know, I may call Anna. Remember I did that webinar with you? You owe me one. I'm going to call out my favors. You know, why not? I was there for you. You need to be there for me. Even if it means take me out for lunch. Yeah, I'm going to call out my favors. So, you know, there's three, I call it the 3 B's. Be brave, be bold, and brag. Those things will help you. Yeah, brag about your great work. Be bold and say, yeah, you know what, Anna, you owe me a lunch. And be brave. Put it out there. Put out your truth. Because once people feel your passion and they feel your inner you, like I know people are feeling me right now, then they'll want to help you. They want to be part of your network.
I love that. We're getting some questions mostly directed towards Chandra, I believe, kind of on how you market yourself or make the pivot if you are interested in less traditional journalism and maybe more of a corporate communications role or something like that if you've only worked in the journalism field.
Yeah, so it isn't as big of a pivot as you may think it is. I know that people that started out working in journalism were a little afraid of, you know, corporate America. And maybe we should be, I don't know. But I have found actually that they are more in awe of our skill set than you. We're also, because we've been surrounded, because I've started out as a journalist as well, we've been surrounded by people that can do a lot of the things that we can do very easily, write intelligently, break down very complicated information for lay people to understand. We know how to interview. We know how to read a study. I mean, thinking about health in particular. These are not things that most writers, marketers, communications, PR people are good at doing. It's a different skill set. They want you because you know how to write about something and write about it to an audience and make sure that you are an audience first writer as a journalist or as a writer editor, which you're like, duh, like what else would I be? But that's not the way companies think of how they market or talk to their consumer. They think of it, of course, of being like consumer first, right? Like making money first. So just having that perspective is very unusual, but also your secret sauce. So don't think of it as it's like there's not a big change that has to happen. I think that the biggest change has to happen with you and your confidence level to be able to do these jobs, and less about the fact that you don't know that you can't do them, right? So being able to say what you're good at is super, super important. And then also kind of knowing the language, like knowing what a white paper is, and knowing what case studies are, and just I mean, these are not hard things, right? But it's just that you may be writing things that are different than articles. So doing a little bit of research on that. I don't want to get too off without specifics, but there's a lot of jobs out there. The other thing that I think that people struggle with is what they're called, right? So it's very easy when you're looking for reporter or writer or, editor jobs. And sometimes they can have names like content strategist and communications strategist. And it's just like, what the hell do these people do? So unfortunately, you tend to have to dive into, you can't just do a filter for these kind of jobs. Like you really need to go to the places that you are interested in working for, and then see what they have offered and read through the jobs that are in their marketing department, their communications department, and sometimes their creative services department. Sometimes they're even under product, because they're not going to have a media department, if that makes sense.
That's really helpful. Yeah, just changing the language. Melissa, maybe you could add to that a little bit and how your experience was. I think you've done you did some freelancing, and then you did freelancing again after Bustle, but now you have a couple more steady gigs. What did that look like for you, or what surprised you when you were looking for writing related income, and like where you found these roles?
Well, I guess what still kind of surprises me looking back, is really just echoing what you and Rebecca said earlier. Every opportunity I've gotten in the last year plus since I've been laid off has been through my network, like every opportunity. And I've gotten a couple of these, like, steady, like, either I've gotten a couple of, like, maybe like a 3-month contract or a 6-month contract, or I've a longer one now. They've all been things that haven't been advertised, it's just like through knowing people. And I had this, like, maybe this is dumb, so maybe I'll be embarrassed for sharing this, but I had this, like, epiphany last year where, people are always saying stuff like, oh, it's just about who you know, but I had this epiphany, like, well, we all know people. So, we literally all know people. So I've been so amazed at I suppose, like, if you can go back in time, or maybe just even think about your career moving forward, just like, don't burn any bridges, because it's crazy, like how those connections come back. Yeah.
So can I just jump in here, because it reminds me, in the same survey that I do every year of people that work in editorial and content, I ask them how they got their jobs, right? And because I'm always trying to stress this point that you have to get jobs through people, but that's so daunting and scary, because you're like, well, I don't know anybody, just like you said. But what I found is only 30% of people got their next job through blind applying to a job. That means that 70% got their job through a person that they know. Now, that means that you need to be working those connections. But as Anna actually said, which I thought was really interesting, it is more about the connections that are connected to the people connected to. LinkedIn had a study last year that showed that you're more likely to get your next job through second or third connections than first connections. So it's not going to be your former boss that is necessarily going to hire you. It's going to be your former boss's friend from high school or whatever,
Right.
because you reconnected with that former boss, right? Like, Melissa, I would love to know, I know that I'm not the moderator here, but I'd like to know how you got the corporate comm gig.
Yeah, exactly. Through a former colleague, but she wasn't the one hiring. It was like through a friend of hers. So like, you know, she has lunch with this person all the time. This person was like, oh, I'm looking for writers. And she's like, oh, I like, you know, connect with my friend Melissa. So yeah, exactly that. Yeah. I think like, just like, you know, kind of like Anna like alluded to this, like networking gets like such a bad rap. It's just like, oh, like it sounds like so like just barf, like, you know, LinkedIn, like, and journalists are so like, just, I don't know, there's just something that rubs a lot of people the wrong way about it. But like, just try to think about it, like just getting coffee with people who are interesting, or like getting a drink with people who are interesting. I mean, we are lucky that journalists are very interesting people. So I've tried to think about it that way, and not, it helps the cringe factor a little bit.
Yeah, such a good point. Zach, some of the questions are, you know, I think kind of an obvious question after a lot of this conversation is, well, what if I'm like really new to journalism and I don't really have a lot of clips, or I don't think that I have a lot of connections? I think we've kind of answered that piece of it. But maybe, I don't know if you do any hiring of reporters, or at least are kind of involved, have been involved in that in the past, certainly. Do you have advice for kind of early career journalists who have been laid off or just even trying to break in?
Yeah, definitely. I did hiring at both Business Insider and at Stat. So in terms of how to stand out, I think the first thing to emphasize is what everyone has been saying, which is, you know, don't be shy about, you know, reaching out and pursuing your, you know, second and third degree connections of connections and stuff. You know, at the very least, you know, I think if you you know, if you have that second or third degree connection, that's going to make sure that someone, you know, at least looks at your resume, looks at your cover letter, looks at your application. You know, these online application tools are kind of, you get a lot of bad applications, and it can be really time consuming to sort through them, and you don't want yours to get lost in the pile. So, you know, just doing that basic kind of connection outreach, you know, or even saying, hey, I have a question about this role. I will say, if you reach out to someone, you have a question about the role, like, please make sure it's a real question. You know, it's something that's not answered in the posting. But I think, you know, I'm always happy to chat with folks. And I know that like any editor, you know, who I've worked with who's been doing hiring is very happy to like field questions and inquiries and, hey, is this a job a good fit for me kind of stuff. So I'd start there. In terms of how to make your application stand out, you know, I think it's really going to depend. It depends on the role. It's hard to talk in, you know, in sort of generalities about this. I will say one thing that I always look for, and I'm going to talk about clips because I think, you know, as a journalist, clips are super important, is that in any role I've ever hired for, like we always want to see some kind of ambition in the clips. You know, it depends on the role, but really like, are you doing stories that, you know, no one else has done? What is interesting about these stories? Are these, you know, they may not be like traditional like scoops or exclusives, but like, is this an angle that no one else has had? Is this just like a really interesting, well-written feature or profile? Just, you know, something that says, hey, you know, I'm a journalist who really cares about my craft, who really cares about the work I'm doing. I'm not saying that's going to get you hired, but just, you know, in terms of how you think about clips. And I would say even for the roles that I've hired for, you know, we do want to see typically like some stuff, some clips that are relevant to the role, but more just like, are you a journalist who's thinking about this job? You know, even if this is a clip from your, you know, for entry level folks, you know, your college newspaper or college class or something, you know, that can be more powerful than, you know, kind of I got sent to the city council meeting in my internship kind of clip. You know, and I'm really like, again, you know, I'm gonna get 130 emails from everyone here, but like, you know, very happy to talk with folks about, you know, how to stand out in this kind of process, because I think it is hard. There's not a ton of jobs. The jobs are super competitive. But you know, it's just some thoughts about how to put your best foot forward.
Yeah,
I
go
wouldn't
ahead.
mind jumping in because I hire, and actually just hired in a health journalism role. And it's not every health journalism role are you going to be a good fit for. And this, I think people try to be everything, and it's actually more important for you to be specialized because you're more likely to get the roles that you have a unique skill set for. So I was hiring I needed a journalist who had specialty in deep health, who also had newsletter strategy experience. And I wasn't going to sacrifice any of those things for that role. And so 99% of the people that applied for that role were not qualified, and I would not look at. So I think, and I know you're like, but I could do it. I could do that role. Yes, you can. But my client, the hiring manager, really needs the one person who's going to be on the staff to be able to do those things. So try to spend the hours writing the cover letters and spending the time getting to know the people and finding the hiring managers and digging deep into the jobs that you are a unique fit for, because you're going to have, that's going to be more fruitful for you.
Can I follow up
Yeah.
on both,
Please.
Chandra? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to talk about the TV audio portion here. Okay. Just like you need clips, you need little things of video. You interviewed somebody, you thought on your feet. Let's say President Trump was walking by, you just happened to be there. Yeah. Put those clips, maybe, the longest 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Put them in a YouTube channel, create your own YouTube channel. You can also put audio clips there with a photo of whomever. If you interviewed me, my photo and my audio clip. Those are important, very important. But also, like I said, be bold, be brave, brag. Put it on LinkedIn. Oh, look, I just got an exclusive interview with the mother of this person. They just discovered some big thing in health. Great. That shows me that you're creative, you thought on your feet. I also need to hear and see your style of interviewing. That is important, especially in television, in podcasting, in audio, which many of these digital sites, including print, want. I have this newsletter and people contact me and they want someone who can do a little bit of each. They can shoot video, but at the same time can offer a clip. They want to make sure they're multi-platform. And so I really think that along with the clips, if you can do audio and if you can do a little video, even on your phone, I mean, this is our best friend right here, right? Put it out there, put it on your LinkedIn. It is so important today. And like I said, I just recently talked to someone from the networks who said he looks straight at LinkedIn. He looks right at LinkedIn and sees what you have to offer. What are you putting out there? So don't be afraid to brag about your work. Put it out there. Show what you have to offer over, somebody else, which is important because maybe someone is going through, maybe they're not linked into you, but they'll be looking. You can always see who's looking at your work. I think that is very key today. And one of the things that I always go with this motto, it's not only what you know, but who knows you. You can know everything. You have a gazillion Emmys, whatever. But if people don't know you, they can't offer you an opportunity. They can't offer you a job. So put yourself out there. And for the people who are new in the business and thinking, well, she's got a huge network, baby steps. Baby steps. Let's say I'm new and Anna asked me to be on this webinar and I'm just, still in college. Look, baby steps. These people are now my network. And that means their networks are my networks. So baby steps. You're not going to have the network that all of us, each one of us has, but eventually in due time you will, whether you stay in journalism or not. Your network goes with you.
Yeah, that's great. One of a couple questions are about freelance work specifically and how you find steady work. I have linked a post that I did about this for HCJ's website that has a lot of good advice, I think. But one thing I will plug too is if you are an HCJ member, we have a directory of freelancers. And so editors, instead of just putting a call out on Twitter or just getting bombarded by pitches, they can really find people more targeted that way and assign stories by searching for somebody who's a freelancer who specializes in biomedicine or specializes in older adult care or whatever it is. So that's one little perk I wanted to mention. But also, I think when it comes to finding steady work, it is once again about connections and who you know and who knows you. But I also say I can follow up with this once I find it. But my first maybe 6-8 months of freelancing, I ended up making a chart to kind of visualize all the different ways that I had gotten assignments. And one was, an old editor. One was somebody I met at a Christmas party who introduced me later to her old editor after she got laid off. And then Another was somebody who I had been on a committee with at the National Press Club 15 years ago, who saw that I posted on Facebook that I was looking for work, and he had worked at a medical magazine and introduced me to his editor. So it's just like all of these different places, kind of people come out of the woodwork. But I also want to kind of talk about that in terms of how, and maybe Zach and Melissa, actually all of you could probably speak to this, but I might start with Zach. How if sort of freelancing is for you, or if you really do want to put in the effort and to try to find a full-time job, whether or not it is in journalism or not, because I thought I was really surprised at how much I've loved freelancing. It never was something that I had really considered. I thought I needed structure. I thought I needed somebody with kind of that security. And then once I kind of got thrown into it, it's been so great that I have this role now, talking about freelancing all the time. And so for me, it's been a surprise that it's like a very personality driven thing. I am a social person. I just happen to have a lot of connections. I keep them up pretty well. I also really like the ability to just write like a story is due at this time on this day, and however I get it done, I get it done. And nobody needs to know if it took me a whole week or if it took me 2 hours, as long as it's good quality. I feel like that kind of fits how I write better than being at a computer for a certain number of hours a day. But that's all something that I kind of learned by trial and error, and I wouldn't have necessarily left a job to try freelancing without that sort of push. So maybe, Zach, I know when you got laid off, did you try to freelance a little bit and then decide it wasn't for you, or what was your kind of experience in considering both options?
Yeah, totally. You and I chatted a bit about your journey too. At that point, I asked you for some advice about freelancing. And I mean, I picked up a few gigs in part because I was like, well, I could use some money. I was just wanted to also to try it out. I had always had staff jobs. And so I kind of felt like I was pursuing both things at the same time, like trying to build up some freelance gigs and also apply to to jobs. And I think, I didn't ever make a conscious decision to say, hey, I do or don't want to be a freelancer, but it was more like, let's see what pans out essentially. But it also having those freelance jobs and seeing, okay, like I can get some of these and pick some stuff up was helpful because I think it let me be a little bit more intentional about the jobs I was applying for and the things I was considering in the job search side. It's really not easy. And I think advice from you and other folks is really helpful as I was, just getting started there.
Yeah, and one thing I just remembered, another tip I give a lot for kind of finding steady work is looking outside of your traditional journalism organizations, and thinking about university publications, hospital publications. I'm thinking about healthcare writers, of course, and really thinking about, pretty much every hospital or medical center has a communications department. They publish both print and online. I mean, yeah, content. Every association of medical professionals have a lot of materials. When I went through and did my tax stuff this year for looking at all my 2024 income, I was surprised to see, but not entirely surprised. It was interesting to just see it laid out that half of my income came from one. I had 11 different clients, half came from one, and it's the American Psychological Association, where I write for their magazine, and they pay well. They have a different, source of income than ad revenue, and I used to work there, so I had a connection with, my old editor who's still there. But if I was only writing for the sort of mainstream publications, I would not be able to make a living. So Melissa, do you have anything to add to sort of the freelance versus staff if people aren't sure what's for them if they could choose?
I think it does help to have a bit of a independent streak, I guess. Like you said, there is something really nice to just knowing that, like you said, just the job has to be done and it doesn't matter how it gets done. Yesterday, it was such a beautiful day here in New York, and I just went for a run at 3 p.m., which was great, and it's just like, I know my deadlines, and it's fine to do. So, um, I think, uh, I think it's, I think it's for people who don't mind like the hustle aspect of it. Like you kind of do have to like it's great to have a couple steady things, in hand, but like you kind of have to like keep like, looking ahead to like, okay, like this contract is through like, whatever April. So I gotta like look ahead to, to the summer. Um, so there is that aspect to it. You're kind of like constantly like, like, okay, I'm okay now, but like what's next? What's next? So that can be a little bit nerve-wracking. But I do think, like what I said before is true, that like I've been surprised. Like I really thought I was kind of like too neurotic to handle freelancing, that I would just worry too much about the income, and I do. But there is something nice to have the kind of multiple revenue streams to count on. If this one goes away, I have these other ones, and then I have an eye on like other potential places. So it's don't count yourself out if you're neurotic like me.
Well, and even like, yeah, if you are in have a job now, you could become a freelancer tomorrow, whether you want to or not, given this era of layoffs. So I think it's good to just even do some thought exercises around what it could be like for you. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Yeah, I wanted to add that really, if you want to go freelance, really plan it out. I'm fortunate that I was able to go freelance because my husband still worked at the TV station that I departed from, right? So I had health benefits. Um, and that's key for some people who may have a condition they have to go to the doctor often. Savings, like I said, right now, even if you're laid off or think you're going to be laid off, or I'm always, as journalists, we're always prepared for the unexpected. And one could be a layoff or a firing. So really look at your finances. Do you really have to drive a BMW? I drive a Volkswagen Bug. Think where you can really save your money, and see if it's really, while you're building, for example, what Melissa has, while you're building all those people that, basically they're your clients because you're writing for them. They need your talent. Really have a plan. Find what I call a freelance mentor. Okay, that's key. If I was starting in freelancing, I'd probably call Melissa and say, "Hey, can you help me out? Can you give me some, because she knows the mistakes she made and where she did great." Find a freelance mentor. That's very key. We find mentors for everything else. Why not freelance? Which is key. And one more thing that I wanted to share is create your own opportunities. That means I have been invited. I always say yes to all webinars. I do. Because I never know not only who will offer me a freelance gig, whether it's something to write or consulting, but also where I can say I can create something. I was invited to, and not all journalism too, I was invited here in Dallas to a Latina business conference. And they asked me to talk about social media and the media. And I said, okay, so me and two other women are up there. There's like 300, there's CEOs, entrepreneurs, all Latinas, right? And we're talking about social media and the importance and blah, 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 sponsored by a Hispanic business magazine. After the panel, the publisher of the magazine comes up to me and said, "Rebecca, I loved what you had to say. Great work. Well, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah." And I read the magazine, by the way. And I said, "Robert, you know what you guys need in your magazine?" And he's like, "What?" "You need a social media columnist. You need a columnist that can, talk to, these entrepreneurs, they don't have time to take classes on social media. So someone that can talk about the benefits of YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever, how to do it." And he's like, "Huh." I go, "I can do it. I could do that." And he looked at me and goes, "You can?" I go, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, how much is this going to cost me?" I go, "That's negotiable." Because the magazine came out 6 times a year. So here I am. He hired me, by the way. I was paid very well. I did it for 3 years. But what else did I do? I became a national social media columnist, which makes me an expert in another area, right? So when you see an opportunity, again, be brave, be bold. brag about, because he knew on the stage I was kind of bragging about what I can do, what I've accomplished, blah blah blah. So if you don't ask, they don't tell. And fortunate, Robert, the owner of this magazine, hired me. I think I did it maybe 3 or 4 years, but that launched me into something else. So look at those opportunities, you guys. Go for it, because all they can do is say no, and that's okay. We've had no's before.
Yeah, if you've gotten laid off or fired, then you can handle it. Chandra, we're getting some questions on just jobs. We've talked about, obviously staying in journalism. We've talked about freelancing, corporate communications. Are there other sorts of industries that journalists might be overlooking or not thinking about that their skills could be really useful that aren't shrinking the way that some of these others are?
Yeah, well, I will say content in general is always going to the content jobs are going to fluctuate more so. Marketing and content are always going to fluctuate more so than other things in the industry, because unless you are the product like you are in media, then you're going to be subject to changes, because you can cut out marketing, you can cut out advertising first, but you can out the people that are like making your widget. Does that make sense? So when we're in a white collar recession, which we're in right now, yeah, we're going to get hit harder than most industries. That said, we've got to think of outside of our little industry of media. And if you think of your industry as being in health and healthcare, health tech, then there are a lot more opportunities, right? And so that could be creating articles, and could even be investigative writing, editing. You can pretty much do all the same things that you're doing now, but you're going to be doing them for non-media companies. Now, as far as like finding those, what I recommend, like think about right now, not just your connections, but also your sources. So all of you are very well connected, probably because you're journalists, to organizations, to experts, to doctors, to researchers. Those are people too that you can reach out to. But I know you're like, I don't want to reach out to them and ask them for a job. Okay, I get it. But what you should do is think back to like when you were a whippersnapper, when you were in college, and you did informational interviews. Okay, you are a curious person. You are a journalist. What do you want to know about the place that person works or the job that they do, whether it is your source or it's your old colleague or whatever? Instead of reaching out to them and saying, can you help me find a job? Reach out to them and ask them if you can chat with them about their job. People love to talk about themselves. They do. So, and as you know, and if you're a good journalist, you know that you ask the question and you wait for them to give you the answer. So let them talk about themselves. And unless they're psychopaths, they will ask about you. And they will say, oh, I saw that you were laid off. Oh, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go next? And then you tell them. And then that plants the seed for what will hopefully be a job down the line, because maybe they will talk to somebody else and be like, oh my gosh, I was just talking to this girl, Melissa, or this guy, Zach, and he does exactly what you should talk to him. You should talk to her. That's what you want to be doing, is planting these seeds. And that's how you start planting these seeds. So I would highly recommend that you do that and start reaching out. Start with the easy people in your life. Start with your closest sources. Start with your family, start with your friends, and then you get better at it. You get better at talking about yourself. So I know that's a little bit off topic of like, how do you break in? But how you break into an external industry is the same as how you get a job in the industry. You're going to leverage your skills and your expertise in that particular area. So you guys all have an expertise in health. So you're going to leverage that expertise to get a job in wherever it is. I hope that makes sense. I'd also love to talk about the farce that is job postings, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I saw some people in the comments were talking about ghost postings and are things even real anymore and whatever. And somebody else had a stat in there that said 70% of job postings aren't, or 70% of jobs aren't even posted at all and all this stuff. And I don't know if that stat's true, but I will say that the worst way to find a job is to just be applying to jobs on job boards. Like, you're going to fail if that's your only strategy. Job postings are now not only being AI screened, as somebody said on there, which can knock you out right away, but they also get so many applications, so quickly that you may not even ever get read. So that's why it's so important to do the other is start reaching out on the other end, right? Or applying directly through career sites rather than on Indeed and LinkedIn and those kinds of places. So that's just.
Let me jump in real quick, because my newsletter, I pretty much communicate with every editor, every manager, every news director to talk, okay, how's this process? Because I don't want anybody ghosted. I don't want anybody feel ignored. Sometimes they'll try to send me a link through Indeed or whatever those sites are. I'm like, no, I need direct to you. Who are they going to be talking to? I need all of that, because I don't want what Chandra just said. I don't want that they're applying and it goes nowhere and then I look bad, right? But so before I put something on my newsletter, I make sure I know the people who are giving me this information. I'll ask them questions about it. And I always tell people, if someone never answered you or was rude to you, let me know, because they'll never get on that newsletter at all. And a lot of these people, they want to be in that newsletter. I do have not recruiters. I always tell people I'm not a recruiter, I'm not a talent agent, I'm not a news manager. I'm just a journalist who put together a list. But there are managers who have come to me and said, look, I really don't want this job on the list, but I'm sure you know somebody who could qualify for this.
Yeah. Work with me, I'll hire you. We can work together.
Yeah. So, and so that's what I do. I'll try to find them somebody, because, right now, news managers in the news business are hiring people, and many will just pick up and move unless they'll just say, forget it, I don't want this job, you were toxic. And even if they have a contract, they're breaking their contract. So, and I also make sure that the manager asking me to be on my newsletter with a job is a good person. If they're a bad person, I'll let them know, I heard you were not very nice. I'm sorry, can't do this. Because you know what? I'm not going to recommend a job where someone's toxic, a jerk, a racist, no, or a misogynist. I'm not going to do that. We deserve better today. We do.
Lovely note to start to wrap up on. We have a couple very practical questions that hopefully we can answer quickly that I think I'm curious what you'll say. One about what do we think of X these days? Are we still on it as journalists? If not, where are you? And similarly, what are your feelings on the open to work logo on LinkedIn? Does that help or hurt or do nothing? Chandra, you seem like you might want to answer, but I'll let anybody step in.
Well, I would just say for X, I don't think that's the place to find jobs anymore. It used to be. It used to be a great place when it was Twitter and when it was pre-Elon, I thought it was a good place to find jobs. But I think LinkedIn is the place to be. What as cringy as it is, I think it's the place to be. One thing we haven't talked about is how important it is to be discoverable on LinkedIn. So it is not just posting on LinkedIn. If you don't feel comfortable and don't feel like you have anything to say, that's okay. I mean, if you do have something like Rebecca was saying, great. If you have, but you need to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is optimized. So recruiters like me, hiring managers like Zach will find you when we are on LinkedIn, which is where we're going to go to find people when we are hiring. So I think that is absolutely crucial. Oh, I just saw somebody say LinkedIn Premium is free to journalists. You just need to apply. That's great. I don't even know if once it runs out, that free membership, I don't even think it's necessarily important to pay for LinkedIn. I mean, you have a lot of the benefits without premium, in my opinion. I live on that stupid site. It has some really wonderful things, but it's also, it's great to connect with people that, anybody and everybody.
Chandra, I'm a little confused with what you're saying. You live on it, but you find it cringy. What does that mean? I mean, because I live on it. I find it as a big asset. for journalists. So I was wondering, why do you find it cringy?
I find it cringy when people are posting a lot of their personal braggy wins, or they're like, I feel like there's some.
But why don't you look at it as accomplishments? I mean, again, I find nothing wrong with bragging about accomplishments. I mean, if
No.
my
I'm
ass,
sure it's not you. I don't. I'm sure it's not you. I just.
no, I'm not taking it personally. I'm just saying for people out there, because I've told them, hey, brag about your work, but you're saying, you see bragging. I think it's a good thing. If people don't know what you've accomplished, I mean,
I'm not reading it, honestly. There's a lot, on all social, there's a lot of stuff. LinkedIn tends to be cringier than all the other social media platforms in the sense that it's work, right? So it is not necessarily as sexy as an Instagram. Can we just say that out loud? It's just not. LinkedIn, there's been lots of hilarious posts about how LinkedIn can be cringe, and I don't need to get into that in the last 4 minutes of our talk here. But it is an incredible asset, and as a recruiter, I can't live without it. That is where I find people. If you're not in my database already, I find you on LinkedIn. That's how I find you. Of course, if you're not optimized, if I don't know the details, I don't know your skills, you don't have case studies of your work, then finding you, it isn't going to be helpful. But you 100% have to be optimized on LinkedIn, because I can't find you, right? Or anybody else can't find you to hire you.
So, and I wanted to go back to X. I'm on all platforms. Yeah. Do I believe in what Musk is doing and all that? And I see a lot of racism and hate. Yeah, I see it. But, part of being a journalist is being able to see everything that's out there, right? I'm fortunate that no one's ever trolled me. I mean, usually if someone goes after me, I just go back in your cave, leave me alone. And they do. But, I think it's important to be everywhere and anywhere. It's like me having to cover Trump one day and maybe cover the Democrats another day. Just because I don't believe in one philosophy doesn't mean I cut them off. Do I believe in what Twitter has become? Of course not. But it is another channel. I'm pretty much on every platform you can think of, because again, we find stories and sources everywhere as journalists. I don't know about other professions like PR and whatever. That's a whole thing. But I think as journalists, I believe in that. And also on LinkedIn, I find LinkedIn to be a very, very important tool for journalists because, again, it is a place where people can see you shine. I think that's important, that your about portion, that don't run it through AI and write it through AI. The other day, an executive producer from a TV station asked me to look at her. And I said, did you do this through AI? Just be honest. And she goes, a little bit. I go, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And I kind of helped her rewrite it. I go, now do you feel it? She goes, yeah, because it sounded robotic. It sounded stale. It sounded like AI. So for all you people who think AI can do it for you, remember, AI does not have feelings and personality. You do.
Just on the social media thing, I'm not sure if this even counts as social media, but I've just been surprised that no one has brought up Substack. I think that's a really good place increasingly. Like, I know when I was an editor, I used to keep an eye on Twitter, like to see what people were saying, writers, what they were kind of commenting on. And sometimes I would commission stories that way. And I wonder if that's happening through Substack now. Of course, it's sort of annoying to think about like giving your work away for free, but I think that seems to me like an increasingly important place to be as writers and editors.
I 100% agree with that. I feel like the conversation is more elevated on Substack and the Substack notes. If you, especially to like keep yourself informed about whatever your particular specialty is, because people are going to speak your language and you're going to make those connections and learn about opportunities in places that you may not have thought about or forgot about. I think that's really smart. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's great. We're going to have to shut this down. I think it could be a whole nother hour. There's so much to talk about, and you guys are a wealth of experience, knowledge, inspiration. Really happy to have this conversation. I had actually just talked to a freelancer that I'm going to be writing an AHCJ post about, who has a Substack, and he was saying that exact thing, which really surprised me, that he gets a lot of assignments by writing about what he's interested in, and then editors assign him that way, as opposed to what I was thinking, well, if you write about it, then you can't write about it again because you've already put your stuff out there. But he actually finds it attracts the right people, and he doesn't have to do so much pitching. So that to come on the website. But thank you all for coming. I'm sure you can do your journalistic work and Google us and find other ways to connect with all of our panelists today if you want to. And I think a lot of you are connecting with each other in the chat, which is great. If you're not AHCJ members, I encourage you to look into that. We also have a Slack community there, which is really supportive, and a lot of other resources for freelancers. And we will continue to bring you webinars on a variety of health topics in the future. So thanks so much for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you,
great
Anna.
day.
Thank you.